How often does an individual upon this earth achieve their dreams? I'm not talking about the superficial fulfillment of getting that job you always wanted or going on that ideal vacation destination. I'm talking about a deep, almost mystical fulfillment of one's wildest fantasies. The kind of experience that marks the end of a long road of aspiration. I'm willing to wager that almost nobody reaches this achievement, mostly due to a lack of opportunity in an unfair world, and in small part due to a lack of ambition or fear of failure. Those circumstances make the exception to the rule that much more special. The culmination of that old adage by Seneca that luck is when opportunity meets preparation. To truly and deeply dream is to be vulnerable to some extent, to put your passion out into the world and open yourself up to potential derision, support, and indifference in equal measure. That's why I admire those who dream loudly and boldly, those who dream unapologetically. In the face of a world cast in irony as a layer of protection from sincerity, life is too short to apologize for your passions and compromise on anything relating to one's dreams. And the man who most represents this to me in modern wrestling is none other than the Mad King himself, Eddie Kingston.
A candy-colored clown they call the Sandman tiptoes to my room every night just to sprinkle stardust and to whisper, go to sleep, everything is all right. I close my eyes, then I drift away into the magic night. I softly say a silent prayer like dreamers do. Then I fall asleep to dream my dreams of you. In dreams I walk with you. In dreams I talk to you. In dreams you're mine all the time we're together. In dreams, but just before dawn, I awake and find you gone. I can't help it, I can't help it if I try. I remember that you said goodbye. It's too bad all these things can only happen in my dreams.
Eddie Kingston's journey from the proverbial bingo halls to main eventing pay-per-views and stadiums is one I find particularly inspiring, for a multitude of reasons. My longtime friend, Scallop Rascallion, a wonderful musician who will be linked below, dug up an interview between the late, great Brodie Lee and Eddie Kingston that I will also link below. and man, did it affect me emotionally. In the interview from 2012, Brodie jokes about Eddie working New Japan someday, to which Eddie sadly remarks that the idea is a pipe dream. Of course, nowadays, Eddie is a Triple Crown champ, one of the components of which is the New Japan Strong Openweight title, and he also competed at the 2023 edition of the G1 Climax. But the dejection with which Eddie speaks with a decade ago still finds a way to make my heart ache for him. He's been very open about his own struggles with mental health and doubts upon his career prospects, being close to retiring before making his big breakout year in AEW. Because of this, it's nice knowing that there's a happy ending, but I never want the pain, anxiety, and angst that led to this point in his career to be the almost universally renowned talent that he is to be neglected. To paraphrase noted philosopher Dracula, Eddie is him, he has been him, and he will continue to be him. This is perhaps a slightly narcissistic statement, but I see a lot of my own traits in this journey, the desire to go big in lieu of settling for anything short of fulfillment. Eddie famously is a huge fan of the King's Road, one of the greatest periods of wrestling history, when the four pillars of All Japan and their contemporaries like Jumbo Tsuruta, Genichiro Tenryu, and the ever underrated Jun Akiyama produced greatness on an almost weekly basis. They told layered, subtle stories, all without the aid of American wrestling conventions like traditional TV promos. They let their in-ring work speak for itself for the most part, with the intricacies of certain moves being kicked out of or not, for example, signaling the progression of a story. While Mr. Kingston is dynamite on the mic, pun intended, he's taken a lot of those ideas to heart. For example, a series with Claudio Castagnoli showing a slow progression towards the eventual dethroning of the ROH World Champion. But further than that, Eddie has made his loves for the King's Road known, wearing the Misawa-inspired gear to Full Gear 2020, or doing Kobashi and Kawada spots in the ring. As a kid from the streets of Yonkers, New York, who grew up trading tapes to catch a glimpse of Japanese wrestling, I imagine it felt like the ability to walk in the shoes of those legends felt nearly unobtainable. In fact, for years, whenever someone asked Eddie who his dream opponent was, he gave the name of Jun Akiyama, as most of the other principal actors in the King's Road story were retired or sadly passed away, in the case of Mitsuharu Misawa. Rest in peace. These days, Akiyama makes his home in DDT, so any sort of matchup seemed to dwell only in dreams, as for most of its existence, AEW had only a working relationship with Bushiroad, the parent company behind New Japan and Stardom, rather than Cyberfight, which owns DDT, Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling, as well as Pro Wrestling Noah. This all changed when a deal was struck, and the likes of Cinnabon Enthusiast and Dreamboat Konosuke Takeshita crossed over to the American wrestling scene. Finally, Eddie's dream seemed achievable, and anticipation heightened when it was announced that on an episode of Rampage on November 18th, Jun Akiyama would tag with Soup versus Eddie Kingston and Ortiz. The tension between the two was the main story of the match, and the little doubt in my head that we might not get the match made me savor it even more. I won't go into any extensive detail of this tag, it's good, but not anything to write home about, but it feels so damn intense, as Eddie and Uncle Jun give us a taste of what's to come. Finally, the match is made for Full Gear, and Eddie gets a chance, so few of us do, to realize a childhood dream. Win or lose, great match or snoozer, this is going to be a triumph, which all leads us to the next day, November 19th, 2022. Eddie Kingston makes his way to the ring second after a somewhat understated entrance by Akiyama, and it's immediately evident that he's in a different state mentally, eyes laser focused on Akiyama in the ring as he makes his way down to it. As the match begins, there's a blink and you miss it spot that I really appreciate. Eddie blocks a jumping knee attempt by Akiyama. Upon rewatching, I realize it's not just any other technical counter. Eddie has watched Akiyama and the innovator of the move, the late great Jumbo Tsuruta, so much that he absolutely knew it was coming and how to counter it. It's a level of attention to detail that the old masters of All Japan would respect, so good job, Mr. Kingston. Eddie knocks Jun down and looks like he's going to continue to bully him before an epic stare down followed by an honorable tie-up. Eddie tries to grab a collar tie but is out-wrestled by the college standout, getting his back taken by Akiyama before countering with a double wrist lock and using it to reverse position. I see Kingston with a little amateur wrestling, and I wouldn't mind if he did it more of this in the future. Akiyama attempts to do the exact same and is rewarded for his efforts by a full Nelson. Unable to break through despite his raging old man strength, he has to go to the ropes, which acts as something of a moral victory for Eddie. After the break, it begins one of the best sell jobs of that year, as Akiyama begins working over the neck and temple of Eddie with stiff forearms to the side of the head and neck. It's gross because of how truly vulnerable those areas are, but early on, Kingston can shake it off and respond with strikes of his own. Each neck shot diminishes the potency of Kingston's returning strikes, and it results with a great sell from Eddie, who briefly does the chicken dance Leon Edwards style before steadying himself. Seeking to change things up, Eddie gets it moving, eventually stopping a top rope attempt by dumping Akiyama to the outside. Eddie tries to set something up on the apron, but gets punished by one of the most sickening DDTs I've ever seen, outside of a Kenny Omega slaughtering Will Ospreay on an exposed turnbuckle, or Shingo Takagi taking a decade off of Zack Sabre Jr.'s life in the New Japan Cup. Akiyama adds injury to more injury with a disgusting knee drop that nearly decapitates the Mad King. Eddie once again sells marvelously, clutching his hand as if he's caught a stinger, visually representing something as internal as head trauma or nerve damage in a visually striking way. For other examples of this, watch any Bryan Danielson Sicko match, or Timothy Thatcher vs. Chris Hero in the Battle of Los Angeles. Akiyama keeps on the pressure, stomping the wounded lion before hitting him with a pile driver. The great selling continues, and all that damage is not yet enough to put Eddie away, as he kicks out multiple times. The end of Akiyama's dominance ends once again with him attempting to go to the top rope, being punished by a karmic neck shot of his own and falling to the outside. The Brutus of Burning returns to the top of the turnbuckle, but after jockeying for control, is sent flying in a superplex by Kingston. Eddie finally becomes fully unhinged, battering the artist formerly known as Mr. Christmas with machine gun chops that probably give Akiyama PTSD flashbacks to facing Kobashi. An attempt to break out of this loop by Jun is countered into a beautiful half-and-half suplex, and now on equal footing, the two men trade bombs for a minute or so, each man's fighting spirit willing him back up after each volley. After Jun kicks out for an umpteenth time, an incredibly emotional moment sees Eddie motioning to the sky, perhaps channeling the spirit of Mitsuharu Misawa. He goes titties out and challenges Jun to stand back up, to face his doom like the legend that he is. Unsteadily rising like Boromir covered in arrows, Jun stands up defiantly before Eddie lands the coup de grace, a perfectly placed spinning chop to the neck that reminds me of Genichiro Tenryu's knockout shot of Yoshiaki Fujiwara. As soon as the successful pinfall is scored, Eddie snaps out of his rage, seemingly remorseful at having to maim his idol. Thankfully, Akiyama carries no hard feelings, and the two hug it out in a moment that makes Shawn Michaels' retiring of Ric Flair look like Ric Flair's last match in 2022. Perhaps that's hyperbole, but if you come out of this not a little emotional, I no longer trust you as a human being. A great match that becomes so much more given the context. 4.25 stars. Almost none of us get to achieve our dreams. And yet, on the buy-in of a pay-per-view of all places, Eddie Kingston got to do one of the only things he truly wanted in life, in front of an adoring crowd who truly appreciated the moment they were witnessing. Aside from perhaps meeting Kawada as he did this past year, we are seeing the greatest moment of a man's career in real time. A sight rarer than a four-leafed clover, or the Dallas Cowboys making it out of a wildcard round. Seethe, motherfuckers. Eddie went from watching the King's Road to walking it himself, going beyond merely imitating a style to adapting his own version of it, laced with a splash of 90s New Japan and indie brawling. Good artists borrow, great ones steal, and they steal from enough influences that they cultivate something wholly unique, and I think Kingston has done that and much more. This match is a celebration of passion and of aspirations. It's a culmination of one man putting a goal out into the universe and manifesting it not by luck, but by hard-fought determination. It proves that the beautiful is something we can tap into in waking life, and not merely something that must remain only in dreams.
Wow.